Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Sadu, coming to you from another London afternoon. What's nice about today is it's not raining. But we are in autumn, so it is what it is. But I'm looking out a window that has a beautiful view of treetops. And this is the green that I realize I really enjoy about being in the UK and London in particular. And so I was just chatting with my guest today about the fact that the green, the pretty, that makes all the difference. And I'm looking at a beautiful plant in their place. So let's get to that conversation because I think this is going to be another great treat. She is a speaker, a certified NLP and hypnotherapy coach, LinkedIn top voice, and LinkedIn learning instructor. She's leading career empowerment through cutting-edge neurological research and behavioral science. Her expertise goes beyond coaching, focusing on arming audiences with the tools to break barriers, overcome limiting beliefs, and thrive in their careers. With a background in corporate storytelling, executive visibility, and entrepreneurship, she offers unmatched guidance to individuals and companies seeking to excel and leave a lasting impact. Some of her global clients are giants like Amazon, BP, Diageo, EY, LinkedIn, Macquarie, Microsoft, and Yale University have sought her for inspiring talks and workshops that drive transformative change. Marielle Legair, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Florence, for the glowing intro. It's good to be here.
Yes.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. And we're having a lovely cup of tea. I'm just in a good place today.
Yes.
So let us get started. Where are you from? Where are you local? And what is your craft?
Ooh, where am I from? That's the $1 million question. So I guess I call a few places home. I'm of Caribbean heritage. My family is from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So I very much relate to my Caribbean heritage. I was born in Nottingham, which is about 100 miles north of London. And I've also spent a lot of time in the US. I lived for a number of years in Brooklyn, in Clinton Hill. So I call home a few places, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And where are you local?
Where am I local? I guess right now, London is what I consider local to me. But then when I go to St. Vincent, when I go to New York, I feel local there too. So it's very fluid, I must say.
I like that.
Yeah.
And so what would you say is your craft?
My craft is empowering people with the tools to boldly show up in the world as their true selves. So I do that as a speaker and a workshop facilitator. I've developed a framework, what I call the 5 Ps of personal branding. And that's essentially what I teach globally. This year alone, I've had the honor of leading workshops in Accra, in Tokyo, in London, in Dubai. So it's really feels good to make an impact. And I really, truly believe that that's what I'm here to do. So that's what I love to do.
I love it.
It's to teach.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want you to give us not the masterclass, the mini on the 5 Ps. But before that, let's talk about how you came to this idea of wanting to be in that space. You know, you have this background, and what led you to personal branding as part of your passion?
Yeah, I feel like what I teach today is what I wish I had for myself 20 years ago. Essentially, it's kind of selfish as it may sound, but it's what I wish somebody had told me, you know? So I spent my early years, especially my 20s, climbing up the corporate ladder in London, being really impressed by shiny companies and shiny job titles, feeling like that's what I needed to be fulfilled, because I feel like we've been conditioned, especially people of color, we're conditioned to believe that working and, you know, accumulating all of these degrees and job titles are what will lead to fulfillment. And so I did the traditional path of going to university, getting a master's, working really, really hard and just putting my head down and working hard. And then I had quite a rude awakening when I got into the corporate world and I realized, wow, academics alone just isn't sufficient, and that's when I realized I didn't really have the soft skills needed to really, really advocate for myself and climb up the ladder. So I had spent a lot of time working in the City of London. I was working at a large Big Four accountancy firm. And there I ended up leading the PR for the corporate finance team. So you can imagine me, a young, impressionable girl, working in the boardrooms of M&A, private equity, restructuring, real hardcore finance topics, right? And I'm having to write press releases and articles to really promote these senior leaders. And I found myself over time shrinking because firstly, I didn't look like them. I didn't speak the language. I didn't necessarily know much about corporate finance or private equity, but I was a good writer. But that wasn't really enough, to really be able to navigate and build relationships and build rapport with these influential leaders. So I recognized that there was a gap in my knowledge, if you will. And what happened was I gradually just began to shrink and become a shadow of myself. And it's something that a lot of people experience, actually, that just aren't able to put a label on it. Some people call it imposter syndrome. I know there's different schools of thought. There's people who believe imposter syndrome doesn't really exist. There's other people who believe it's a real big problem, so it really depends how you see yourself. But for me, I definitely know that I just didn't feel comfortable. So it was around that time that I went to New York on holiday with my sister. And I remember we were walking around Brooklyn this was around this sort of time. So it's very pretty in New York around this time, all the leaves are turning and, it's just very picturesque. And we did a brownstone tour. We did a tour of, I think it was Bed-Stuy. We did a tour, you pay $20 and they show you you get to tour the brownstones. And I remember then being on that tour and telling my sister, oh my gosh, I need to move here. I need to move here. And I randomly met this guy from Hackney, London, who had just bought a brownstone in Bed-Stuy. And he was just selling me this whole dream, basically. And me being me, it was like, oh my gosh, I need to live here. And he was telling me if ever you move to New York, you could be whoever you want to be here. The sky isn't the limit, it's just the view. And I was like, oh my gosh, sold. I need to move here. Sure. So I remember I went back to my manager on Monday morning, got back to London. And I remember vividly, I walked over to him and said, hey, I want to move to New York. And he was just like, what? What do you mean you want to move to New York? You're in London. What are you talking about? And I was like, yeah, I really want to move to New York, this, that, the other. And he was like, okay. Maybe there might be a secondment or something we could maybe see, but yeah, let's just see. And from his response, I could just tell that he was not going to do anything to help me move. So I got proactive. I booked myself a flight to New York that summer and I started networking with my peers in the New York office because I was working in the London office. Sure. So I started then networking on the ground with the people in the New York office. This was July 2012. I remember it well. And then a job came up and I got offered the job opportunity and I moved a few months later. I was flown out on an all expenses paid flight to New York to live in 2012, November 2012. And what's funny about that, you mentioned manifesting, and I'm a spiritual being, right? So I remember I had created a vision board of the image that my sister had taken of me walking down the street doing the brownstone tour a few months prior. And I would sit here where you're sat right now on my sofa. I would sit and look at the vision board. I would close my eyes and I would feel the feeling of living and breathing in New York City. Yes, literally, I would picture myself. That is exactly how it works. Yeah, literally visualize myself walking down the street in walking along the brownstone filled streets. And people would laugh at me when I showed them this vision board because they were like, but you don't know anybody in New York City. Like, what are you talking about? But I called that in. And today what I teach is very much aligned with visualization. And it's funny how things kind of come full circle. So I managed to get flown out, first class flight, and my New York chapter started in 2012. And then corporate America. I mean, how much detail do you want to go in?
Yeah, no, we want to know. So where I want to understand that, because you mentioned it before, is that part of working, right? The operational side of figuring out how you're going to work in another country. Tell us about that process.
Yeah, the operational side of figuring out how to work in another country. So I had no idea, to be honest with you. I had no clue, but I had this vision, right? I would say that I'm very much a blue sky type person. I don't really get, bogged down in the details so much. And in some ways, that's a good thing, because sometimes when you get so focused on the how, that stops you. When you have a big dream, whatever it is, you don't necessarily need to know the how right away. You just need to know, like, I'm doing this, right? I'm doing this. I don't need to know how it's going to work out. But as long as I put my momentum and my energy towards this, that it's law, right? It has to manifest, right? It has to happen. So that was me. That was very much me. So I was working in London, and I knew that we were linked to the US office, essentially. So that's why I flew out there to begin with, because anything that you desire, I feel like you have to get yourself immersed into it. So I knew that there was only so much I could do from my desk in London. That's why I was like, you know what, I'm going to go there. I'm going to go there on holiday, and I'm going to start having conversations. Every opportunity that we desire comes from somebody else. And it's a very simple thing to say that, but this is why we all need to be good at building relationships. Like, simple, how to win friends and influence people. Anything you desire is going to come from somebody else. So we need to get good at having conversations. And this is what I teach as well, because a lot of us overlook that. We try to operate in silos, but everything we desire is going to come from the marketplace, right? So we need to know how to influence people. So that's why I went there, because I was like, I need to be having conversations with these people. And I remember going to the office, in the New York office, for the first time, and they were based at 30 Rock, the Rockefeller Center. And they were on something like the 55th floor or something. I don't even think I've ever been that high up in a skyscraper before. So this was new to me, because London doesn't have as many tall buildings as New York, right? So I remember just looking out at the view and seeing the Empire State Building and seeing, Midtown. I was just being like, wow, this is amazing. Just feeling like so enamored by it all. So that's how I made it happen, just by cultivating relationships, sitting down with people, telling them what I wanted to do, what I could do for them, more importantly, what I could do for them. And then I was offered the job opportunity, and then they sorted the visa and everything else out for me. So that was really the first step. And then when I got to New York, that was such a culture shock. Definitely character building for someone, a small girl from a very small town. I'm not really I'm a Londoner now, but I wouldn't necessarily say I'm more of a small town. I'm from a small town, so it was a huge culture shock. And I've been conditioned back then, early on in my childhood, to, speak when you're spoken to, and to not really advocate for yourself or not be too loud.
And would you say that, because remind me where you're from, St. Vincent, is that an English colony?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
And so do you think that part of that speak when you're spoken to, a little of your home culturation that puts you in that space, is part of that legacy?
Oh, absolutely. And just being like Black Caribbean as well. Like, so growing up in the UK, I was often the only Black girl in my class, in primary school, in secondary school. So those are the formative years when your identity is being developed. So to be told, only speak when you're spoken to, or just don't make a scene, or just be grateful for what you have type thing, you find yourself kind of just, shrinking without even knowing it, because you're conditioned to not want to be out there. And sometimes it's not even spoken, it's kind of just assumed.
Right. The environment just kind of projects it onto you.
Yeah. So it was very real. So there was so much unlearning that I had to go through during especially my early years in New York, because I would find myself again sat at these boardroom tables, but this time everything was heightened because I feel like New York is like kind of 10 times the speed of London, right? Everybody kind of walks faster. And it's just like little things that you would notice. So when I would board the subway train to go to work in the office, I would notice, for instance, everybody like walking up the escalators. Everybody would walk up them in New York.
They keep moving. They wouldn't just stand still.
Everyone keeps it moving. In London, people stand and go, you literally let the escalators like carry you up. So just little things like that. I noticed, wow, this is fast. Like everything is faster here. People talk a lot faster. Everything was fast. So I really had to unlearn a lot, but also learn a lot. One of the big things that I had to learn was communication, because as an introvert, I'm naturally somebody who prefers to listen. I know that I'm talking a lot now, but I'm naturally somebody who's comfortable just listening.
Yeah.
And people would assume in New York that if you just sit and listen, that you have nothing to say or that you're not very smart. So I actually signed up to go to Toastmasters, which was deeply transformative for me, because for those of you that aren't familiar, Toastmasters is like a global public speaking training leadership program. So they give you a workbook and it's 12 modules, 12 speeches that you have to work through, and you have to they get harder as you go along. So the first day that I went to Toastmasters, you don't even touch the book, right? They literally just give you an icebreaker, and it's literally 2 minutes. You have to get up in front of a room of strangers and talk on a topic. So it could be something like, why is the sky green? And you're like, well, it's not green. Yes, it is. Talk about why the sky is green. And you literally have to talk for 2 minutes and people will assess you. Sounds really daunting, but it's such a great way to get out of your comfort zone and to just get comfortable communicating. And that was really transformative for me, because for a start, I had to learn to speak up. I had never in my life. I was in a very sink or swim environment in New York, I found. Like, it was very much like, you're either at the table or you're on the menu type environment. It was like real dog eat dog. And I really had to learn like how to really just advocate for myself like never before. And Toastmasters was such a great training ground for me to practice that in a safe environment. And then I had to learn to network more proactively, because I didn't really have a network there. I moved by myself. I didn't know anyone. So I did feel quite isolated to begin with, but then I found like, wow, there's actually quite a few expats here. And I was able to tap into that community and quickly make friends. So there are a few things that I just had to just be much more intentional about securing my future, really, more than anything.
Right. But you began your entrepreneurial journey in New York.
Yes, I did. And that was almost by accident, to be honest with you. For a start, I was working in this job that wasn't, as much as I was grateful to have that opportunity to live in New York and to have them, pay for my visa to be there, the work itself wasn't really that fulfilling. It was very much admin, right? And I was at a level where I had passed doing administrative tasks, but because there was nobody else to do the admin work, it kind of just fell on my shoulders. And I remember just feeling quite frustrated, but I had to reframe that and think, what is this trying to teach me? Oprah talks about that, doesn't she? Like, instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Reframe it and ask, what is this trying to teach me? And at that point, I really had to get still and think, okay, what is this teaching me right now? What can I learn? What can I take from this environment? And that's when I realized, actually, I'm in this big billion-dollar company. They've paid for this. Let me just reframe this. And that was a huge mic drop moment for me. And that's when I really became an intrapreneur. I wasn't yet an entrepreneur. I became an intrapreneur first. So this is something that I teach in my workshops, actually. And it's really about the mindset reframe that we have to take. Because to begin with, I had very much an employee mindset, right? Where I would just put my head down and do a good job. And I used to think that that was enough. And that was, again, conditioning. You know, we're conditioned just to work hard. That's all you need. That's not true. So, because with that mindset, that leaves you very prone to risk, because you're not really building your brand. You're just working head down, almost like a 1960s factory worker. You come in, you do a good job, put your head down and leave. Nobody knows who you are. You literally just do the job and leave. That leaves you very, very prone to redundancies and so many other things, because people aren't knowing who you are, right? And I remember I had lunch. There was a very senior partner who took me under his wing, and he would give me advice on how to navigate the corporate world. And I always remember one thing that he said to me, and it was mutual usury. They're getting stuff from you in terms of your labor. What can you get from them while you're here? What can you get from them? And that was such a light bulb moment for me, because like I said, up until that point, I was just like, why am I here? I'm so lonely. I was really feeling sorry for myself. So that was a big reframe, because he essentially helped me think, okay, while I'm here, I need to make this work for me. So that's when I became much more entrepreneurial in my mindset. So I signed up to every single learning course that was available to me. I signed up to NYU. I got them to pay for every single training possible. So this was like a copywriting course that I did. I did so much to really just prepare myself for when I eventually would become an entrepreneur. So Toastmasters was one of the things, copywriting. I started networking. I started writing articles. One of the articles was, I think it was Gail who found one of the speaking engagements that I did. I spoke at Yale University, I spoke at NYU University, I spoke at Hofstra University. I did all of these things to start raising my profile. And I remember one of the universities had seen one of my articles, and that's why they had invited me to speak. I can't remember which one. But those conversations that I had with guys like the senior partner really were the rocket fuel that I needed to help me reframe how I was seeing that situation. And I think oftentimes it is a reframe that needs to happen, because we could choose, I think it's Brene Brown who says, you could choose courage or you could choose comfort, but you can't choose both at the same time. So I had to really get courageous at that time and really start just pushing myself forward. And that's when I was able to, through the kind of entrepreneurial activities that I was doing during my 9 to 5, I was able to get my green card and get that independently on my own. No one helped me do that. I was funded it myself, did it all by myself, and then was able to start my business and essentially live and work in the US. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's not a small feat. So that's why I wanted to kind of get a sense of how that happened for you, because I think you hit it on the nose when you said it's about mindset, the courage or
comfort. Yeah, we could choose. We have to choose, and we can't have both at the same time. So it is a decision. And I realized, looking back, it all makes sense now. I really had to go through that, because I think initially when I moved to New York, I very much had that employee mindset, which is, it's my manager's responsibility to develop me. They need to be pushing me forward. No, they don't. They often don't care.
No,
that's
you are
reality.
Part of the machine.
Yeah.
If there's another tool I can pick, then that's
conveyor belt.
What will happen.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Literally. So that was the reframe. And as soon as that light bulb went on, I became unstoppable. Yeah. I became unstoppable because I was in control. I was driving everything forward like never before. And I've never looked back.
Sure. And you are now in a new place, right? And so this makes me think about why the where. You're in New York. Yeah. Now you're back in London, but you're kind of local in many places. So why the where? How did you come to be living, working, and playing where you currently are?
Yeah. So the story that I shared, a lot of the ups and downs that I experienced in corporate America, the big thing was, wow, I know that there are so many other people that are going through this. They may not necessarily want to start a business, but they likely recognize that there's certain skills and certain tools that they need to develop in order to thrive and become much more fulfilled in the work that they do. That's what led me to create my framework, which I call the 5 Ps of personal branding. And it's very much an empowerment framework that I feel if we all could master this framework, we will thrive and just feel much more fulfilled in the work that we do. So I'll go through it. I won't go into too much detail, but the first P is all about performance mindset. So that's looking at how you think. How you think determines everything, right? So what do you think about self-promotion? Are you somebody that sees it as cringy, or are you somebody that recognizes it's necessary to drive yourself forward? So equipping people, and that's when I very much touch on neuro-linguistic programming, which is what I'm qualified in, essentially looking at the inner workings of the brain and how to overcome limiting beliefs. That is a key part of any career, right? The second part is pitch. So helping people become much more proactive than reactive. In life, you get what you pitch for. So really just helping people feel comfortable pitching themselves and putting themselves forward. And then we look at presence. So how to command more presence despite your title. Executive presence isn't necessarily about being an executive. It's about how you show up, like how you embody confidence, right? And then looking at your digital presence. In this digital climate, people are always going to Google you, likely before meeting you in person. So we need to make sure that we all have a strong digital footprint. And then looking at partnering. So as I mentioned, every opportunity you desire is going to come from somebody else. So we need to know how to network more effectively and how to really build relationships. And then plan is the 5th P. So that is helping people think more strategically about their careers and really have a clear quarterly plan. The same way businesses operate in quarters, I recommend that we all should have quarterly goals for our career development as well. So holistically, it works really well. And I teach that workshop globally. So my clients are the likes of BP, Diageo, LinkedIn. I absolutely love the work I do because it's very transformative to really empower people with the tools to help them navigate their way through the corporate world.
Right. Yeah. And so that helps you to be this global person. Like you don't have to be in one place or in another, because I think we started talking about one thing that kind of helps with grounding yourself is having a place. And you had your place before you moved to the US. So I think that kind of helped facilitate you being able to come back and have a new base to do whatever it was that you need to do.
Yes, absolutely. And you're right. I think it's almost like you kind of just, it's nice to have somewhere that you could know, okay, if things don't work out, I could always just go here, you know. I think that's nice to have. Yeah. But in some ways you get too comfortable as well. I think sometimes I'm very much a creature of habit. So I am guilty of just getting too comfortable, which doesn't always serve me well. Sometimes I do need to have a bit more urgency around like, okay, it's time to go, you know?
Sure. And I think it's also a point of where you are in your life, right? So as the decades move on, you're at different points in different places. So kind of makes sense.
That's very true.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned something that's interesting. All of the training that you mentioned in the certifications, neuro-linguistic programming. Tell us more.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, this is like, I really geek out on this stuff because it's essentially human behavior and studying kind of how the inner workings of the mind work. So to explain it, you know, we have a subconscious mind and a conscious mind. And the conscious mind is the logical mind. And that is responsible for approximately 5% of our thinking, whereas the subconscious mind, like the deep-rooted stuff, that's our emotions, that's our trauma. These are the things that we do on autopilot. That's responsible for approximately 95% of our thinking and our behavior. So in the work I teach, a lot of people, they recognize that, okay, I need to network more. I do need to network more. That's the logical mind telling you, I need to network more. But if your subconscious mind is telling you, well, no one likes me, or I'm an introvert, so I can never go up and talk to people. Which do you think is going to win? Do you think the subconscious mind, which oftentimes we're not even aware of, or do you think the logical mind is going to win? It's always going to be the subconscious mind, which is like the motherboard, really, of our inner workings of our brain. So for me, I'm just fascinated by this because I recognize I used to work with a lot of women, do one-to-one coaching with them, and they would come to me and say, hey, I need help. But oftentimes they would hold themselves back, and it's often because they hadn't addressed the deep-rooted limiting beliefs that we all have. But until we addressed them, we would often stand in our own way. So in the work that I teach, I essentially help people become much more aware of the limiting beliefs, their subconscious mind, and then teach them how to rewire and reprogram those neural pathways so that they could be much more intentional about addressing the behavior that is keeping them stuck and really help clear those beliefs that are harboring their growth, you know?
Yeah. So that sounds a lot like a mindset hack.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a huge mindset hack. Yeah.
So I have that question. I always ask about what your mindset hack is. And so that one kind of applies to your work and how you do your work. But what is your mindset hack? How do you, hack into...
Yeah. Oh, what is I mean, to be honest, I've got several.
Please,
I've got
share them
several.
all. Yeah.
Like, I really believe language, that's something that NLP really focuses on. And language is so, so important because I'll give you a perfect example. I recently went to a retreat last weekend, and there was a woman who stood up and she was talking just amongst us. And she said something that I really didn't agree with. And she said, life is meant to be a struggle. And I was just like, whose life are you talking about? Because not mine. And I was saying, no, sorry, I don't agree. And I was like, I don't agree. I don't think life is meant to be a struggle at all. That's not what I'm buying into here, So I feel like the stories we tell ourselves are, like they say, words are spells, right? So we have to become so aware of the language that we tell ourselves. So that's one thing. I try to be very mindful of the story that I tell myself through words, the story that I don't even, just the thoughts I think are so, so important. So I try to challenge myself on what story am I telling myself right now? And is that story true? Is it true that I don't have time? Or can I just make time? What's the best that can happen versus what's the worst that can happen? Whichever way we phrase things is going to end us up in totally different thought patterns, right? So I always ask myself, what's the best that can happen here? Another example, last week I had to do a 20-minute presentation. I've never done a 20-minute keynote before. So 20-minute keynotes, I was initially thinking, I agreed to do it because I was thinking this is going to be out of my comfort zone. I'll just say yes. But at the time, I remember thinking 20 minutes, but just agreeing to do those sorts of things. So I think, again, what's the best that can happen?
Yeah,
so
that's a good one.
Yeah, really just asking myself that, what is the best that can happen here? And dwelling in that possibility, I would say, is a very simple but effective mindset hack that really works for me.
I like it. That's a great one. So speaking about language and the words you choose, what is your Glocal speak? So a word, a phrase, or a saying that is a meaningful part of your local experience, and how or why you value it as Glocal speak.
Oh, wow. Glocal speak. What is it? Maybe something that I say a lot is rich rising. Yeah. Because again, going back to, and I know there's a lot of talk online about the negativity of grand rising, like a lot of people are like, oh gosh, it's so negative. But, the word morning, like good morning, a lot of people say morning has different meanings, right? It could mean good morning, it's a new day, or it could mean you're mourning the loss of something. So to me, something like rich rising is just like it's just such a uplifting.
It lifts up the day.
Yeah, it lifts up the day. And it just reminds me that it's a new day. It's an abundant day. It's going to be filled with blessings. And that kind of just, just helps me feel good.
Nice. I like your lingo because you have a lot of nice phrases. I think that comes from the work that you also do.
Probably.
So I'm curious about how you establish yourself. You know, you've kind of given us a lot of the feedback on that, but being an educator, being on LinkedIn, being in those spaces, how has your experience been to build that presence on, particularly, I want to say on the LinkedIn circuit. And I think that probably has helped propel you into many other spheres.
Yeah, for sure. Great question. I think it started with the inner work. You know, Steve Jobs says you can only connect the dots looking backwards. And I truly believe that, right? Like I can only, you know, we're in 2024 now. 2014, I was in a very different place. You know, I was like in this job, feeling like, why is this happening to me? So I think that reframe and just deciding to really take control of my path, doing the inner work, really getting clear on, you know, what trauma have I experienced? How can I release this? You know, I've invested probably over 6 figures in my personal development, right? Like, so I've worked with coaches. I don't have a coach right now, but I've worked with coaches to really help me understand myself at a real deep level. So I've done a lot of energy healing, right? So clearing, we all have an aura, right? Like we all have an aura. And if you meet people, like one of the biggest compliments that I get is, oh my gosh, I love your energy. I love your aura, right? But equally, you probably met people who have quite a heavy aura, right? And that just simply means that they probably experienced things that they've not yet dealt with and they carry that around with them. But you could feel energy, right? So not to go too woo-woo on, I don't know how woo-woo
I love
you go.
woo-woo. So.
Okay, good. I don't know how woo-woo we go on this podcast, but for me, that has helped me really because I didn't realize that back then, even how I was able to call in the whole New York chapter in my life, that was very much a spiritual journey that I had to go on. And even now, the work that I do is very much a result of the spiritual work that I've done on myself. So that has helped me be able to show up much more powerfully on LinkedIn. That was what attracted them to me, you know. Just by doing, I used to do a lot of videos. I still do videos, not as many, but I used to just post very short videos on LinkedIn. That got found by somebody at LinkedIn and they said, hey, we would love for you to create a course. We love how you teach. And I was like, wow, this is great. And then as a result of that, LinkedIn, that was LinkedIn New York, but then as a result of that, LinkedIn New York then also invited me to be interviewed for their podcast at the Empire State Building, which was a great experience. I'm still in touch with the editor, Andrew, now. He's very supportive of the work that I do. More recently, LinkedIn London invited me to teach and lead several workshops for them, for their people at the office in London. So all of that stems from me just doing the inner work on myself and really clearing those negative stories, those negative experiences that were kind of clogging up my aura to be able to now call in stuff that is much more aligned and at a much more higher frequency, you know? So I think it always starts with ourselves, like doing the inner work. And then, you know, once you kind of start to raise your own vibration, you kind of meet bigger opportunities, right? You call bigger things in.
Yes. Yeah. You hit it on the nose in terms of raising your vibration. So, and it does really stem from that internal, that internal healing self.
Yes.
And so makes perfect sense. I wanted to talk about impact because I know that you're making impact, but you just recently spent some time doing some impactful work in the Caribbean. Yes. So can you tell us a little bit about that journey, that story? Because we know there was all this hectic energy, earth energy going on. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you. Thanks for the reminder of that. I almost forgot. Okay. So there was a Category 5 hurricane that impacted many of the Caribbean islands in early July. And I was very fortunate actually, because I was in the Cayman Islands a few days prior. And I was leaving on that Saturday and everyone was saying, oh, there's a storm coming. I was like, oh, is there? Okay.
Right. Like thinking like, it's just rain, it's the wind.
Yeah. Good thing I'm leaving type thing. And Yeah, it turned out to be a huge Category 5 hurricane. Is devastating. Like
No power, roads
like
difficult, no water.
Yeah, landslides, that sort of devastation level. So I remember just hearing about this hurricane, and as you know, my family's from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which is on the leeward side of the Caribbean. So that side of the Caribbean typically is not impacted by hurricanes at all, or if they have adverse weather, but it's never Category 5. So this was a huge hurricane that left so much devastation across St. Vincent, Grenada, even Jamaica, which is on the windward side. So yeah, the loss of, I just can't even put it into words. But I remember watching all of this unfold and feeling so helpless. And because I've spent a lot of time in St. Vincent, you know, when I turned 40, that's where I celebrated turning 40. My dad lives there currently. It really, really hit home, and it really kind of shook me to the core just how you know, a population could potentially just be wiped out. So seeing this all unfold, I just felt compelled to do something. And I hadn't actually planned anything of what I did, but as I watched all of this, watching all of the, you know, people just losing everything, I was like, right, that's it. We have to do something, right? And initially people were saying, just donate money, because that's what people do, right? Just give money. And I was a bit nervous to do that because, let's be real, we don't know where money goes or how much of it actually gets to the people on the ground. So I had this idea, a bit of again, I'm very much a blue sky person. So I had an idea to create a flyer and to essentially create an Amazon shopping list of essential items. So that was sanitation products, food, dried food, everything that you would need, you know, if you had just lost everything, basically. So I created this Amazon shopping list, and I did a very simple video on LinkedIn and posted to educate my audience on what was going on the ground there, because there had been hardly any news coverage about it. Surprise, surprise, hardly any news coverage. So I just felt like it was a great opportunity to communicate and help. And I was so overwhelmed, Florence, by the outpouring of support that I had received. Literally, I had this whole front room where you can see right now was literally covered with Pampers, baby food, women's products, dried lentil, like everything that you can imagine. And I remember just feeling so overwhelmed, but in a good way, just by the amount of love that had been just shown, you know. And I remember just packing up the barrels. So we ended up shipping 6 barrels over there, which was so well received. But at the time, I just remember just packing up these barrels and just sobbing to myself, thinking, oh my gosh, like, you know, packing like the sanitation products and everything, just like, wow, like
to not have access.
Yeah, to not have access, all of us just like that. And something really, during the midst of all of that, I randomly got a message from a lady who she had seen the flyer that I had created. Somebody had shared my post. So I wasn't connected to this person on Facebook, but somebody had shared my post to their network, and she had seen the flyer and sent me a friend request. And initially I was a bit nervous because I saw that she was actually based on one of the islands that had been impacted. And initially I was like, oh, I can't deal. You know, this is just too close. But then I was thinking, you know what? She's actually the very person that I need to help.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So she sent me a message and she said, you know what? I've got 4 kids and my fiance, we've lost everything. Can you please help us? Is there anything that you could send to us? And I was like, okay, sure. So we sent her a barrel of food and clothes and everything. And it just felt great to be able to just help people directly on the ground. And then with the remaining barrels, I was able to partner with her and her local church to distribute everything on the ground. So it was such a blessing that, you know, she often says, you're such a blessing to me. But equally, she was a blessing to be able to work directly with her and just make sure that her community had what they needed to at least begin to get back on their feet.
Yeah.
So it was a huge effort. It was very tiring. I underestimated just how much humanitarian aid.
Right. It's big work.
Yeah, it really is big work. But it's, and it really did get me thinking, wow, like, this is what I could do with my community on LinkedIn. We all could do something, we all can. So, yeah.
And it makes me think about the job market and employment markets, because we have a huge deficit of people who could help. And we have a world full of people who are suffering from different kinds of disasters. And the aid industry is somehow co-opted by those who are not actually doing the kinds of things that you're doing. So thank you. Kudos to you. I think it's awesome work. And so in this time that's passed, what are the insights that you're now hearing? How are things on the ground?
Right now, because of the huge amount of rainfall, because everybody on the ground said it was almost like a tornado. It was almost like a tornado and a hurricane wrapped up into one. So things were swirling around, like there was a lot of rain. So now the issue is dengue fever. Like people die from being bitten from these mosquitoes. So that's the big issue right now. So it's really just helping people stay safe from the dengue fever. That is the big issue, because the hurricane season isn't fully over.
Right, it's still on.
So
there's still the rain.
Yeah. So I'm just praying everyone stays safe more than anything.
Well, we'll put something in the show notes in case you have other outlets that are still needing help, so that our listeners can take a look at that. So we've talked about all your wonderful business and a little bit about your leisure, but it's more service. So we want to know who you are when you're not working and speaking and traveling the world.
Yeah.
Are you a reader, a watcher, a listener? And what are some of your favorite reads, watch, or listens? Or what else do you do in your leisure time?
Yeah, that's a great question. What do I do? You know what? I'm very much a homebody. So I do love to just chill at home. I'm very big on working out. Like, I believe like the mind-body connection is very real. So I'm a huge advocate of, eating well. Like, I love to cook good food, move my body, just simple things, hydrate well. I'm reading 2 books at the moment. Big reader.
What are those books?
So one is, I'm heading to Paris to see Joe Dispenza, the neuroscientist,
right,
which is very much linked to my work. So he's given us a lot of homework to do.
Okay. Yeah. Now, is this your first Dispenza summit?
Yes, it is. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, you're the first person, maybe the second, that I've spoken to that's gone to them. So
really?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, but everyone says great things.
Yes, and I've not been to Paris in a long time, so I'm really looking forward to doing that. So that book is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
Okay.
So I am looking forward to going, but it's just it's actually a lot of work he's given us. We've got to go through his course, do his meditations. I did his meditation this morning, and then read the book as well. So
I like his meditations.
Yeah.
I think what takes him over is the breath work, because he really goes in on the breathing, and then it's a whole different situation. So we could talk for hours on that kind of thing, but okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other book that I'm reading is Steal the Show by Michael Port. I went to he's a New York Times bestselling author and also a speaker coach. And as a speaker myself, I'm always curious to know how I could improve my presence and impact. So that's just a book on how to be a more effective speaker, which I love.
Okay, good tips.
I need to read more fiction, actually.
More leisure.
Yeah. I do need, I need to make more time. That's what I need to do that.
Sure. I just finished an interesting one that kind of brings in the Caribbean into the US. It's kind of magical, kind of mystical, and it's called Creatures of Passage
Okay. I've not
And
heard of it.
so I'll put that in the show notes for folks too. I'm a big audiobook reader, so
Oh, are you?
I love how I take them with me. So
Yeah.
wherever I am and how I recall a lot of the books is when I'm back in those places.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
there's
good.
so many books I've walked and I just remember certain patches. I'm like, oh, I remember that book every time I pass this. So yeah, Creatures of Passage. We'll put that in the show notes. So that might be, if you're an audiobooker, it's an easy listen.
Is it hardback?
There's also, it comes paperback, hardback, all those things. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that. And back to what I was saying about neuro-linguistic programming, you know, one of the things they talk about is like the different learning styles. And I'm very much a visual person, as you probably could tell with me sharing like visualization and things like that. So I do love audiobooks, but I've got to be in the right place for them because
you'll be distracted by
So are you would you say you're more of an audio then?
I think I'm even.
Okay, that's good.
I'm pretty even, but I tie them together. So what I visualize to recall what I've heard.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But I listen a lot.
Yeah.
That's what draws me to the podcast world. Like,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, this has been so lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And before we sign off, do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Last thoughts, I would just say, remember who you are, remember who you are. You have so much greatness within you, within your bones. So never lose that. Always remember that.
Yeah, I love it. Remember who you are, folks. And be sure to like, share, subscribe, leave us a review so we know who you are. Catch us Tuesdays with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us up to a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and a thumbs up on YouTube. And be sure to check out our show notes because you can find out all the places where you can find Marielle and her wonderful work. And until next time, bye for now.